Oh, yeah. Cool. All right. Great. Good to see some more folks joining. Good to see you all. Welcome to Piano Tech Radio Hour yet again. Let's see here.
You guys all from the States? If there's someone that's not in the United States, you should let us know in the chat or just chime
Oh
in real
yeah.
quick. I want
There's
to know where
some
people are from.
people. Well, we've definitely got our resident Canadian here. Hello there. Well, I've got a couple Canadians, I'm sure. Um, but Glasgow, Scotland, David Boyce. Welcome. And we're just about to get going here. A preview of what we're going to talk about today, though. We're going to dive a little bit into Piano's Inside Out, that wonderful tome, which we all enjoyed so much as a resource. And I'll let you know the details of that. But yeah, just kind of give ourselves some. I did a project several years ago that I started and actually could be finished, but they had a nice start to it. And I think we can delve into what's going on. But it was, yeah, David's got his book. David, keep it along. You can use it as a cheat sheet potentially. And we'll have some quiz questions today, which I think will be fun. But let me give official introduction to the session, and then we'll get going into the topics at hand. So welcome to Piano Tech Radio Hour. We gather here every Saturday to meet with and learn from the most fascinating and knowledgeable folks in the piano world, including manufacturers, rebuilders, musicians, makers of other instruments, and of course, piano techs. Our mutual goal is to become better at our craft, helping each other, and creating an ever more musical world together. Piano Tech Radio Hour is brought to you by Piano Technicians Masterclasses, an online learning resource that brings you cutting-edge instruction from piano industry masters without leaving your home. You can find out more at pianotechniciansmasterclass.com. And I will give a brief introduction to our co-hosts. So there's me, Ethan Janney. I've been rolling on this project basically ever since the beginning of pandemic, at least with Piano Tech Radio Hour. And then even before then, since about 2017 with Piano Technicians Masterclasses. And we've recently started Piano Technicians Masterclasses on my own, just to bring more global education to the people who need it all over the world, and a place to have camaraderie and support. And then David Anderson came on board to be a heavily influential part of that and helped me in getting rolling with this radio hour session. And then he passed away, unfortunately, a bit ago, but we always feel his spirit here. And recently, Morgan Carl has come to join us as the ambitious young piano tech that he is out there in Nebraska land, in the heart of America, working on pianos and making them sound lovely. And he's a North Bennett Street educated piano tech who cares a lot about what he does. So we have some great discussions with him in the mix. Okay, so there's a bit of an introduction to what's going on today. Thank you all for being here. Really appreciate your presence. And basically, what I'm going to do today, I'll do a screen share real quick to kind of give you a visual on what I want to share about. And let's see, where is that? Let's go to this. Boom, this article, and we'll get it shared. Share screen, and that's it. Okay, so what you're seeing here, we've gone through this. This is actually a blog I maintained many years ago. I haven't updated it a ton recently, but I've been delving back into it for some interesting stuff, all the way from stories of my travels in Peru, and finding and connecting with people in the piano world that were there. Everyone from kind of the guy who had the multi-generational, German descended piano business in Lima, to the local piano technicians in remote areas, to the concert piano players or violist and violinist, and or a diplomat that plays piano all over the world while he's being a diplomat for the country of Peru. So lots of interesting stories that I've outlined in the blog. But today's session, I want to take a look at this article that I had written. And so the goal of this particular sort of thread, that's called a thread, was to delve into this book, Pianos Inside Out by Mario Egrech. Most of us, I think, are pretty well familiar with the book as kind of like, it's been a while since it first came out, but when it did, it really hit the scene hard. People were really impressed with it. It's kind of like the next level of kind of that all-encompassing almost piano encyclopedia that touched upon kind of all the aspects that you'd like to know as a piano tech, general knowledge. And of course, there were other resources that dove more specifically into specific topics, but a very great general resource written by Mario Egrech, who I believe is now still the piano technician at Juilliard. Definitely had been for many years recently. So the goal here was to kind of just dive into the book as something very interesting to get your hands dirty with. And so what we did is we actually did it among a small group of folks, and we would read through the pages, read through the pages one by one. Don't treat it like just that resource that you flip through here and there, but kind of read through the content and kind of dive in a little bit deeper. So what this article does is it covers pages 1 through 50, which ends up being like a chapter and a half or so of the book. And I see so many people, I can see on your cameras, like Carl, you've been able to just like pull it off. It's like right there on your shelf, which I think is awesome. And so basically what the article does, I'll read through it. It's pretty brief. It gives a summary of that content. And then what I think will be kind of fun is I had come up with some quiz questions for like pages 1 to 10, 11 to 20, 20 to 30. And in fact, I'll put this, I'll put a link to this article in the chat, folks, so you can just go take a look at it yourself. If you find it of interest, maybe peek ahead at the questions that we might. So basically that's what I'm saying. I'm going to read through it. And then what we'll do is we'll go through the questions. Some of them you might find kind of basic and simple. You can get a little bit of a dopamine hit about having that quick and easy answer to that question. Some of them are more specific to the content. And, we do have sort of the answers to the question. So if people can shout them out and see if they got it right or give their opinion or whatever. And so basically what we're going to do after I read through the summary is go through the questions. If it's just kind of a quick, easy trivia thing, we'll give people the opportunity to see if they're the first one to answer the right in the chat. If it's one that brings up a topic that's more interesting, we'll have a little bit of a chat about it if it feels like that's appropriate. So without further ado, I think I might dive into reading it. And that is unless, Morgan, do you have any other comments you wanted to make about the topic of the day?
No, I think this is great. It's a really good book. I waited a long time actually to get the book because when I first starting out, those like what, like 80, $90. And for me, $90 for a book, I can wait. And then when I finally got the copy, I think I was mad at myself for like 2 days. It's just such a good resource. So this will be fun today. I'm excited.
Awesome. Yeah, me too. I'm glad I kind of dug this out. And that's a good thing that I think just before we get started on those intellectual and educational resources. I had a similar experience many years before purchasing this book when I was studying jazz piano. And I bought this book, very simply titled The Jazz Piano Book by Mark Levine, I believe. And it reminds me of The Piano Book, right, by Larry Fine. Both great resources that you should buy instantly if you don't have them. But I bought this book called The Jazz Piano Book by Mark Levine. And again, like you said, I thought twice about buying it. It probably was like $30 or something at the time. But I was a college student, you know what I mean? I didn't really have that much expendable income. And man, I bought that and I started working through it. And I was like, if I had had this 4 years ago, I would be light years ahead. And it's just a book, there's only 100 pages, right? Or whatever, maybe a couple hundred at most. And so I see that with you, Morgan, and myself. And I think a lot of people here who get into education it's there's even just taking the risk on an educational resource, it'll be worth it in the end if you're always making investments in education, without a doubt. Just so much faster and easier. All right, let's dive into this. Pianos Inside Out, page 1 to 50. So a little bit of background. This was part 1 of a series that I did hope to be a 10-part series. I think I only had part 1. I think I do have questions for maybe part 2 or something that I put together, guiding us through this book, Pianos Inside Out by Mario Egret. So many technicians will consult with this book on a regular basis, but sometimes it's worthwhile to work through a text, searching for gaps in our knowledge, undiscovered pearls of wisdom, and just to gain a more solid foundation of the craft of piano work. So again, this endeavor is meant to aid other piano techs and spark interaction and camaraderie, and any feedback that we have that still stands today. If you have any feedback regarding the presentation or format, I'm open to it. So let's move on here to the content. We would start with the first section, which is pages 1 to 50, kind of arbitrarily putting it into 50-page sections. And that would be chapter 1, which covers history, and half of chapter 2, which is on design and construction. The goal at the time, I was just coming out of graduate school, reading all kinds of stuff at a very fast pace. So is to read through pages 1 to 50 in 1 week. Probably did that first 1 to 50, at least in 1 week. And that section covered the beginnings of what is considered the modern piano and some variations along the way. And then it moves on to the composition of the piano, including supportive structure, strings, bridges, and soundboard. And the remaining structure is covered in the next section. And so what I'm doing here is providing a brief outline of the content of these pages, followed by some study questions, which we'll have some fun with later. And you can use this to prime your brain before you're reading, which is actually an interesting point for anybody that wants to dive deeper in this. When I was a student, graduate student, and probably even in my undergrad, I found, you go to the end of the chapter first and you look at the questions that they ask, if it's that type of book that has questions, and it really helps you know what you need to focus on when you're doing that reading, right? You can be looking for the answers as you do the reading. So just a little study tip if you are doing any studying. Sometimes the questions can guide you even if you don't know the answers already. So you can use that to prime your brain before you're reading, or just review the questions after you read. And keep in mind that many of the study questions can only be answered by reading the text of the actual book. So the answers are in the book, and it's motivating to find them yourself if you don't have them already available. So they're not posted, although we will kind of use our cheat sheet today if necessary. And you can sign up to keep abreast of this project. And I'll forward a document. Yeah, that was later. That was previous. We're not doing that anymore. Okay, chapter 1 on history. Brief. The piano was born in 1700, according to the book here. I'm sure there's probably some little debates about the exact year, but when Bartolomeo Cristofori of Florence, Italy, installed the first piano action into a harpsichord, the purpose was to alter the instrument so that strings could be struck by hammers instead of plucked by plectra. This allowed for variability in volume depending upon how hard keys were pressed. And by the way, I'll cut in here. And I think what I'm also interested in with this particular group, I know some of us have like dove in really deeply into various aspects of the piano. So if there's anything here, I like, well, that's not actually true, or, we think about this that way, or this that way now, or feel free to add that at some point in the chat as we read, or, after when we're discussing it. So around the same time, a similar instrument was becoming popular called the pantaloon. That was a dulcimer that modified such that strings could be struck by hammers. And this time, instead of by the traditional dulcimer mallets, which you would hold in your hands, instrument was named after a famous dulcimer player called Hebben Street Pantalon. Throughout the remainder of the 18th century, pianos grew in popularity, spread to various European locales, and were modified in several ways. 1700s saw the introduction of pedals, for example. Vertical pianos evolved from the clavicitherium, a type of upright harpsichord. In the latter half of the 18th century, the Industrial Revolution began to influence piano design and construction. As the century turned, even more advances in technology and a rising middle class meant that more pianos could be constructed and sold. Pianos began to be built in the United States. Bach, Haydn, Mozart, and Beethoven all had the chance to interact with the developing instrument. And as the 1800s progressed, an increasing number of compositions were intended for the piano. It's always fun to like reminisce on a time where the piano was this newfangled thing that might not have actually been popular. Through the first half of the 19th century, the piano gradually became bigger and a louder instrument. The range of the keyboard increased from 5 octaves to 6.5. The cast metal plate was introduced. The double escapement action was invented by Sebastian Erard. The overall tension held within the instrument increased. Inventions and patents to improve the piano proceeded at a rapid pace. Agraffs, cross-string, the capo tasto bar, felt hammers, and technologies to aid in manufacturing, things like hammers, were all patented and introduced in this time. In the second half of the 19th century, Steinway began in America, and then after success there, began manufacturing in Europe as well. Also at this time, the square piano became popular, but quickly lost favor because of many design flaws. As the 20th century approached, pianos became quite a popular instrument and very profitable to manufacture and sell. Popularity continued to grow in the early 20th century. However, as the phonograph, radio, motion picture, and television industries invaded, and because of the Great Depression and World War II, the piano lost some favor. Since World War II, piano popularity has had swells within various markets independently, such as in Eastern Europe, Japan, Korea, and China. So that's the summary of chapter 1. We'll get into chapter 2, and then we'll run into these questions. And some of the answers are clearly in this text, and some of them are only in your books. Construction and design, chapter 2. According to Mario Egreck, piano design history has been a struggle to more efficiently convert that finger's force into acoustic energy. This can be achieved through a number of manners: increasing string tension, soundboard tension and compression, and the mass of hammers. In this section, we learn about the integral parts of a piano: rim, beams, belly rail, pin block, stretcher, keybed, soundboard ribs, long bridge, bass bridge, shelf, plate, strings, beams, nose bolts, Steinway bell, tuning pins, pin block, bridge pins, capo tasto, agraffs, plate flange, pressure bars, etc. The rim of the piano consists of an outer and inner part. The outer rim is essentially a part of the case of the grand piano. There are two manners of constructing the rim. Composite rims are constructed from small segments, and continuous laminated rims consist of a series of laminated boards that are all at once bent around a mold to form the shape of the piano case. The rim of a grand piano supports its structure just as vertical beams in an upright do the same. A dense and rigid rim or frame maximizes the volume and sustain. Beams of spruce join a rim frame with the belly rail. The belly rail provides a rail of support to which the soundboard can be glued. The pin block consists of laminated sheets of wood with grand sequentially angled at 45 to 90 degree differences to one another. The pin block must grip tuning pins firmly and transmit the tension of the strings to the plate and rim. Pin block is generally 1.25 to 1.5 inches thick. In a grand piano, a pin block can be installed in 3 ways. In order of increasing quality, you can have a floating, regular fit, or full fit pin block. Each style adds an extra point of structural attachment, the plate, rim, and stretcher, respectively. And I'll mute a couple noisy folks, and then we'll finish this up. The strings, bridges, soundboard, and plate generate sound. Each of around 230 strings holds around 160 to 200 pounds of tension. Strings are typically made of high carbon steel and sometimes nickel plated. Bass strings have a copper winding to allow for increased mass, slower oscillation, without unmanageably thick strings. The bridge lies compressed between the strings and the soundboard and transmit vibrations between the two. A stiff soundboard reflects some energy back to the strings, which allows them to sustain longer. The bridge has often has a separate root and cap portion. A separate cap can be shaped and notched easily and replaced if it cracks. Bass strings are longer and extend towards the edge of the soundboard where it's more rigid. In order to increase flexibility in the area where the bass resonates, a shelf sometimes is used to allow the longer strings to contact the more central, flexible part of the soundboard. Bridge pins are made of steel, often with brass plating to reduce friction. Notches in the bridge allow strings to vibrate freely where they contact the bridge pins. If notching does not create the same termination point at the bridge pin and the bridge notch, this can lead to false beats. Sometimes termination points on the bridge are engineered to create unequal speaking lengths. Unequal lengths cause slight interferences among the sound waves from each string. This means the strings resonate with one another less effectively, transfer energy to the soundboard less effectively, and therefore can have longer sustain. Soundboard is sometimes mischaracterized as an amplifier, when in fact it is only a transducer of vibrations from the strings to the air. A good soundboard will effectively impede the vibrations of the strings, allowing for a short attack sound and a long sustain. A well-designed soundboard's resonances will be carefully tweaked so that the tone quality from the various strings in the piano is consistent. Spruce soundboard material is rigid along its grain, but less so across the grain. Therefore, soundboard ribs are installed across the grain to create an isotropic diaphragm in which rigidity is relatively equal in all directions. All right. The next post was meant to continue this work through chapter 2. Maybe we'll get back to it if we find a lot of fun today. And now let's get into these study questions. So what I want to do here, Morgan and I decided I will take the questions in order. So we'll go just 1, 2, 3. And for these, if you know the answer or if you just have an answer, we can just put them in the chat. And if they're quick and easy, we'll get through it. I'll between the questions that I do in order, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, Morgan is going to look through the rest of the questions. I think we have about 50 total there, and maybe pick out curated questions that he thinks might be fun to address and maybe even have a little bit of discussion attached. All right. And without further ado, I think let's give it a shot. Any interesting comments in the chat first? Oh, David Boyce, honored to receive a complimentary copy with a handwritten note on the front piece from Mario Agrek, and to find that his website is listed in the bibliography. Very cool, David. All right, let's take question number 1, and let's get this chat open. So don't answer until I ask it, but I think this is going to be a pretty easy one for everybody. Don't be shy in answering. What year, according to this article, if you have a difference of opinion, you're welcome to share it, marks the invention of the piano? Go. One new message, 1700, Larry Lobel. Congratulations, you get a cookie. All right, next question. Who is credited with inventing it? Extra points for spelling it correctly. Bartolomeo Cristofori, David Boyce. Excellent job. We're going to have to get some more cookies to ship out here. Ooh, Larry. Not spelled correctly. Although I think that's a little bit purposeful. All right. In which century, if you were paying attention here, were J.S. Bach, Haydn, and Mozart prominent? Which of them had the opportunity to use the invention of the piano? Okay, 18th century. Very good. And which of those, J.S. Bach, Haydn, and Mozart, which of them actually had the chance to utilize the piano? Any? Bach. Okay, Larry says Bach. Carl says Mozart.
It's an interesting question because we're using the word piano as like an all-encompassing thing when really it's the forte piano. You know, it's the different evolutions of it.
Sure,
I actually happen to have a forte piano in the shop here, and so that's the action in all of its glory for the most part. There's like a bit more stuff on the inside of the piano, but it's very different than what we have today and very lightweight too.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's a great example of what Mario argues in the book, is that the evolution of the piano is moving towards a bigger sound, right? Um, but yeah, according to the article, let's see if we had any other answers in the chat. All in some form. That was David's final answer there. That was according to the article, right? And I think, yeah, like what we're talking about is an instrument where you can vary the volume, basically. I think that's what we're talking about when we say piano. Okay, so let's see here. Actually, I have a little info here, extra info. 18th century was the first part of the answer. All three of them had access and saw the evolving new instrument. Mozart owned a concert grand piano, and because he and Haydn were alive later in the century, they were able to use much better versions and upgrades to the instrument that Bach, at least initially, was actually not very fond of. All right, question number 4. There was an instrument called the pantalone. Where does the name come from? And I suppose answer that in whatever format that you want. And then actually, let's go to Morgan after we answer this one for any cherry picked questions. Okay, Carl said a player. That sounds good. And then David said a guy's surname. Yes. So the Pantalone, it's a hammer dulcimer fitted with a keyboard to make playing easier. It's named for Pantaleon Hebenstreit, a virtuosic hammer dulcimer player. So let's kick it over to you, Morgan. Any questions you want to jump to that you find particularly interesting?
Well, not pantaloon, as is in the chat. That's a whole different thing. That's a big pair of pants. This is a pantalon. Well, actually, it's interesting. I just happen to have a dulcimer in the shop too for some work, and that's all made of wood behind me, and it makes sound. It's noisy, but as pianos needed to get louder, I guess the first question is why did pianos need to get louder, and what additions were added to help that? So it's a two-parter. Why do we want louder pianos? And then what did we do to increase the overall volume?
And just to be clear, is that one of the numbered questions or is that just your
Yeah, yep. That's it's number 2. What major development in piano construction allowed for louder pianos?
Okay. Number 2 in pages 11 to 20. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. And in the meantime, I'm going to put while people are thinking of their answers to that, I'm going to put the notice in the chat for Facebook and YouTube that we're signing off there. So if people want to join us, they can hop on here. And then we'll get back to that question. All right, scroll down.
Yeah, the concert halls got bigger, the rooms got bigger. The orchestras got bigger too. Like a Baroque orchestra is